What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel for another video here, and we're going to be taking a look at Banishers Ghost of New Eden on the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, and the Legion Go. And huge shout out to Focus Entertainment for providing me with a code to check this game out early and look at its performance on all of these different devices. Not only that, I've really fallen in love with the game and have enjoyed it a lot. We'll talk more about that later on in the video, but let's get into the performance, and we're going to start with the Steam Deck. Now, as far as game compatibility, game info, this isn't verified or anything like that yet. However, I haven't had any problems so far playing this game early, launching, having it work properly. So hopefully come launch day, we're not going to have any problems here as well. Now we're at 800p unlimited on our frame rate, AMD FSR 2.2 on balance, but we're going to take a look at a couple of different things with that. I'll probably settle on quality here. And then we're on the low preset besides that. We'll pretty much stick with that throughout the video for the Steam Deck. And even on the lower settings on this game, it still looks fantastic. It's a gorgeous looking game, a lot of fun to play, and it's running great here on the deck. I do have 4 gigs of VRAM set in the BIOS. This happens to be at, on the FSR2 balance here. But yeah, performance will of course vary depending on where you're at in the game, what part of the world are you in combat, and that type of thing. But we'll get to that part. So FSR2 balance, and I want to take a look at some of the different upscaling options here, sitting around 42 FPS. We'll switch this over to performance, and we only gain like 1 or 2 FPS, and that's because we're pretty much already CPU bound. If we go up to quality, we're still at 41 FPS, and this is why I kind of want to settle on quality FSR2. Now TAA 90% comes in at around 3940, so it's kind of close to the quality, and then at 80%, 42, 41, something like that. So depending on what your preference is going to be, you can choose what you want to do there. I'm personally just going to stick with FSR2 quality for this on Steam Deck right now and for the rest of the video to check out performance here. But that gives you a general idea of some of the differences as we stood there. Now getting into combat, now not only is combat really fun in this game and switching between your 2 characters and that type of thing here, it's responsive. It feels good to play, and even when the frame rate dips down, and we're going to get into the 30s here on the Steam Deck during some heavier moments, especially in combat. Frame times might seem a little bit here and there, but honestly it feels good to play. It doesn't feel janky or stuttery or anything like that, which was pretty impressive and nice to see here, especially considering the game, you know, I'm sure is going to have patches, optimizations, and things in the future. Now you get into village areas like New Eden or some of the other spots you're going to come across as you make your way through the game. Your performance, of course, can vary there as well. You're going to have more going on, and like I said, the game is fairly more CPU bound than anything, so there's only so much you can really squeeze out of things here. But I was happy to see how good the game really looks on the Steam Deck and how good it is to play. Even switching between your 2 characters and traversing and that type of thing, it's pretty seamless here. No real stutters going between the 2 or going in and out of different areas. Sometimes there will be load-in areas that you'll get into where it might dip, but not too bad. Getting into like the first kind of boss battle here, performance was really good here on the deck as well. A lot of times we were just in the 40s and 50s, and there wasn't any other NPCs or enemies, things like that happening here. And you can see it's kind of like foggy and there's not a lot of stuff in the distance, so it wasn't as hard to render, and ran pretty good here and felt great as far as responsiveness and being able to play this on the Steam Deck. Definitely surprised me considering how good the game looks, that actually was able to run this decently. Now as far as other parts of this game, you're going to have your resting at fires where you can fast travel, your evolution, your inventory, rest. You do have your quote-unquote flask and that type of thing. So a lot of people will consider this Souls-like, but for me, definitely a different experience than really playing through a Souls game. It does have a lot of different difficulty options though, and you're able to kind of dial things in how you want. But I just kind of want to show this off a little bit. And also performance coming in and out of the menus can be a little hit and miss as well, but you're not doing combat at that time or anything, so it's not really a big deal coming in and out of those, going down into, you know, the 20s sometimes for FPS. Loading in and out. But anyways, that's the performance here on Steam Deck. Banishers Ghost of New Eden looking really good, playing great. Let's go over and take a look at the Lenovo Legion Go next. Alright, so here we are on the Lenovo Legion Go, and we're going to test 20 watts, 30 watts. We'll look at the different FSR and TAA real quick, just like we did over on Steam Deck, and this will be more the concentrated Z1 Extreme testing, as I will show a lot more here than when we get to the Ally. I'm going to really focus on something different when we get down to the ally part. But jumping into this here, as far as our settings for the Legion go, it's very similar to what I had over on the Steam Deck, except we're going to start at 1200p here. I had to leave this at borderless, otherwise I was having some capture issues here. FSR 2.2 on quality, though we're going to mess with that a little bit too because I was using more balanced and that type of thing. And then low on our preset, but medium on texture quality. I didn't get much difference there on performance, and I'm running 6 gigs of VRAM, and it just made things look just that much nicer and worked out well for me here. So anyways, 1200p, low, medium here, FSR2 quality, 20 watts, 6 gigs of VRAM. Now, if we switch this over, we take a look at FSR2 balanced, you can see we're not going to get like huge differences in our frame rate, and very similar to over on the deck. While resource-wise, it's not as bound up, there just is kind of a limit to how well the game wants to run here. So performance there, and then go in here and do TAA. We'll do the 90% again, so this brings us down like 33, 34, 35 FPS, which I would expect at 1200p. And then if we go and change that to 80%, we'll get closer to what we would be getting with like FSR2 balanced at 20 watts. Kind of similar, but depending on what you want to run there, you've got those options to play around with. For me, I think I'm pretty much going to stick with the FSR2 balanced for these settings and for 1200p. It just kind of seems to be the sweet spot that works out the best here, and that's 20 watts or 30 watts here, which we'll go through and show a little bit of both as we run around and get into things. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit. As we get into the gameplay, of course, some areas, just like over on the Steam Deck, are going to run better than other areas. You might see like the 70s like we did there because there wasn't much going on at this 30 watts. But as we move around and get into things, even at the higher TDP, we're going to start to come down into the 50s and maybe even lower. Side by side here of 20 watts balanced versus 30 watts quality, and you can see there's a bit of a difference here as far as frame rate. It's really going to come down to what you want to pull out of the game as far as image quality and FPS and all of that. But either way, frame times were pretty good, pretty solid. The overall experience feels great to play, whether I'm at 20 watts, 30 watts, or whatever the case here. At 1200p, it works out great. Really going to depend like how much battery power do you need to save and that kind of thing here. But no real complaints. A lot of fun to play here on the Legion Go. Now, of course, we do have those switching back and forth areas like I was talking about. You hit the Y button, you switch between your two characters, and this also is very seamless here on the Go, not getting frame time spikes or stutters or any issues like that. It just runs really smooth and works really well here on the Legion Go. So I was pretty impressed with the solid performance. Now, again, running around like the villages, different areas like that, of course, performance can vary, but still held up really well here. 30 watts, and then we'll go ahead and switch this down to 20 and let it settle in. Not a huge difference. I think when we get to 800p, you'll actually see a little bit more of a difference when it comes to how the wattage helps things here. But either way, 20, 25, 30, running pretty decently here. Again, performance will vary depending on where you're at in the world, what village, battles, that type of thing. But overall, easy to stay over 30 FPS and play the game anywhere from 30 to 60 and sometimes above that. And that's really true when it comes to 30 watts or 20 watts, FSR2 balanced or performance or quality. It doesn't make a huge difference, a couple FPS here and there. And if you're not happy with FSR2, you could do TAA 80 to 90% and get away with things there. Now, 800p is a little bit different because it just seems like we get a little bit more of a bump. So 20 watts here, we're actually getting some pretty decent performance in the same area. Bump it up to 30, and then we go up quite a few more FPS there. And I felt like, in general, depending on where I was at in the game, using these settings but at 800p instead of 1200p, the wattage amounts between 20 and 30 actually made a bit more of a difference on my performance versus at the 1200p. So that's just something to keep in mind again too when you're deciding what kind of performance you want to get out of the game, what kind of wattage you want to run, your settings and all that kind of thing there. Didn't always need a lot of VRAM. I don't see any need for anything over 6 in this game, even when I was at the 1200p. But, you know, 6 gigs worked pretty well. 4 gigs every now and then would cause some stutters here and there more than the 6 because there are times it's calling for more, which is why I opted for that there. But yeah, the boss battles are a lot of fun. All the other parts of the game are a lot of fun here, running great on the go. But you can see certain areas, the boss area compared to this area, runs about 20 FPS difference with the exact same settings. So it's just really going to depend on where you're at and what you're doing. But overall, the game's running great here on the go. You can mess around with your settings a bit, but jumping up to like medium was a bit rough. So I think you got to kind of stay low. That's why I went with those medium textures and that type of thing here. And 20, 25, 30 watts, whatever works for you. When you start to go under 20 is when you start to kind of see more of the performance loss here. All right, but with all that in mind for the Go, let's jump over to the Ally and do something a little different. I've already shown so much Z1 Extreme performance that kind of carries over, even though it's not exactly the same on the Ally at 1080, 720, and 900. For the most part here, if I'm at, you know, getting into like 25 watts, 900p on the Ally gives us some nice performance at those similar low settings. That's kind of what we're going to mess with here, but the idea here is I really want to mess with the fluid motion frames. So anyway, we're at TAA 90%, low preset. I didn't bump up texture quality here on this one. And something to note, I believe the Ally, some people are having trouble with the sound. If you have any issues, you might want to click through here and change speaker type and maybe try soundbar or whatever there if you're having any issues. Just something to note. Now, getting into the game here, 900p, low preset, TAA 90%, and 25 watt turbo. We're going to stick with that throughout the video, and you're going to see performance is pretty good, just like over on Legion Go. Depending on where you're at here is going to depend on performance, but it feels really good to play. Frame rate's pretty good, stays, you know, 40s and above for the most part here, and 900p is certainly a nice sweet spot when it comes to the Ally. Now 1200p on the Go is going to be similar to 1080p on the Ally if you're looking for kind of a performance look at that. But yeah, ultimately everything runs really good here. But what I was kind of more excited about when it came to the Ally is messing around with the driver. So we have the unofficial / official. It's the AMD driver, but it's unofficial when it comes to ASUS. And ASUS and Lenovo both have fluid motion frame drivers coming officially soon. But right now on the Ally, the AMD fluid motion drivers actually work pretty well. So side loading them can be a bit of a pain and all of that, but I wanted to kind of showcase that in this video a little bit since we've already looked at so much Z1 Extreme performance. So here we are, 44, 45 FPS in this spot. We're going to go in and we're going to tick on the fluid motion frames for the AMD software here. So AMD fluid motion frames, we'll kick this on. We're going to kick on the overlay because it seems to affect the ASUS overlay. Again, we're waiting for official drivers, but we do all this. And you'll see now we've bounced up to the 70s in the same spot, 80s, and we get a nice gain. Now, some games don't feel so great with the fluid motion frames on, but this one actually looks and feels pretty good. You have a lot of those false frames in there. Sometimes can introduce some stutteriness, input latency, and all of that. But honestly, everything still felt really good here and just continues to showcase how great things like this technology are when it comes to fluid motion frames and taking games like this and making them run even better on something like these handhelds and still be a really nice playable experience without too much input latency added or stutter or any of that. Now, of course, the higher your base frame rate is, the better this is going to work. So if we're running 40, 50, 60, and we're getting fluid motion frames on top of that, it works better than a game that says running 20s, 30s, and you add it. So it does benefit pretty well here because it already has decent performance, but then that fluid motion frame really helps out a lot more. So I can't wait to see this more officially for both the Go and the Ally so we can test it more in the future. But I thought it was fun to show it in this video for the Ally and for the Z1 Extreme here. But anyways, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up. That's your performance for Banishers, Ghost of New Eden for the Steam Deck, the Lenovo Legion Go, and the Ally there with the Z1 Extreme. A little look at fluid motion frames through the Ally there, waiting for those official drivers and all of that. A lot of exciting stuff, and also this game just in general has really hooked me. Really care about the decisions I've been making in this game, the story, especially between the two characters and everything that's happening with the moral decisions you have to make. It's a lot of fun and has hooked me in a way I didn't think that it really would. This is definitely a top tier game for me so far in 2024, and I highly recommend checking it out, especially with decent performance here on the handhelds. All right, guys, thanks a lot for coming to check out the video. As always, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.